Man, some Ford and Chevy guys are going to be irritated with this one because it is a head-to-head shootout. The 351 Windsor Ford versus the classic 350 small block Chevy. Well, it's a windy day here at West Tech Performance in Miraloma, California. You'll hear the whole building rattling throughout this episode, basically because we're bringing the thunder. This is finally going to be the Ford versus Chevy showdown that you guys have been waiting for. It's a 351 Windsor Ford versus the classic 350 small block Chevy. Now, we've done this kind of shootout before where we take two different engine brands and build them as identical as we can and see what happens. Well, this time we have got them closer than ever. Let's have a look at the combinations that we're gonna do here. First of all, the short blocks on both of them are just standard rebuilt stuff. Cast pistons, stock rods, stock cranks, nothing special. You can buy both of these short blocks from Summit Racing. They're about the same price. The 350 Chevy is from First Mate Marine. The small block Ford is from an outfit called ATK. Now, as far as aftermarket components, they're all the same. We're gonna use the same Holley XP 750 CFM carburetor on both engines. We have MSD ignition. The distributors are locked out so they don't have a timing curve in them. So there's no part of the ignition curve that is gonna affect our results here. They're locked out. Both of these things have an Edelbrock dual plane intake manifold. It's a Performer RPM air gap. We've even got the same camshaft in both engines. They're both from Comp Cams. They are a 230, 236 duration at 50 hydraulic roller. The small block Chevy uses a 1.5-to-1 rocker arm, whereas a stock Windsor uses a 1.6, but Comp is compensated for that so that the lift is the same or very, very close on both camshafts. So those are virtually identical. The compression ratio, we have a tiny bit of a difference. Small block Chevy has a little bit more than 9.2-to-1. The small block Ford has almost 9.5-to-1, so a slight advantage right there. It also has 2 more cubic inches. So, you know, Ford guys, go ahead and argue about that. Then we get into the cylinder heads. They're both from Airflow Research. They both have a 195cc inlet port, and if you look at the advertised airflow numbers on these cylinder heads, it is very, very close. As far as headers, we've got a full-length under chassis passenger car header on both of them with 1 3/4 inch tubes. All right, time to roll this thing into the dyno, sauce it up with AMSOIL, and fire it up before the whole building blows down. Okay, we're ready for the traditional oil pour. Remember that both of the engines that we're using in this episode just have stock rebuilt bottom ends. Really cheap stuff, but we don't want them to explode. So, in keeping with the cheap theme, I'm gonna use the AMSOIL OE line, which is their budget synthetic. It is a synthetic oil. Everything AMSOIL does is. Now, the thing is, I've been bugged recently by audience feedback on the oil pour because if I use a funnel, they want to see no funnel. If I use no funnel, everyone wants to see a funnel. So I'm just going back to Freiburger style, this time on the double pour. The two-fisted in honor of 2 engines on this episode. Can I do the long pour with 2 oils? Survey says pretty much no. I walked in here with an actual guess on what was going to happen horsepower and torque-wise on this thing, but just my deductive reasoning of watching you fiddle with it has thrown that out the door. I have no guess.
Really? I've got a pretty good idea.
I have a pretty good idea, but...
I had to fiddle more.
Yeah, you had to fiddle more than I expected.
Yeah, it was. It took a little more timing than I thought. I think because of the compression ratio being relatively
so low. Yeah.
You have to give it a little head start.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we've kind of just dressed up a turkey with this engine.
Well, I know. It's a bone stock rebuilder small block
Yeah.
with some really good cylinder heads on it and then an average camshaft.
Not a bad combination.
Not a bad combination, but you know, my argument to that is if you're a guy who has this engine in your car, you might as well buy the best cylinder head because when you step up to a 383 or something, this is going to be the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
That
That's
AFR
something that
195
covers-
is good.
Yeah, it covers a whole bunch of area there. I mean, it's good on so many things.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was like easiest dyno test ever because you did all the work before we even got here.
That seems to be kind of an ongoing theme here.
What are you trying to say, Steve?
Nothing.
So that's it. I mean, 422.9 pound-feet of torque at 4,300 RPM, and up here at the top, 425.6 horsepower at 5,900. What's your opinion? I mean, I think for a 9.2 to 1 compression motor, it's not that bad.
I think it would be a 370 horsepower motor without this head.
Well, yeah, the AFR head is like the kill for sure.
I mean, a pretty typical manifold that we use over and over again because it's so good, but that cylinder head really, I think, picks it up a bunch.
Yeah.
Pretty much made what we were expecting, so.
Yeah. No surprises.
I
think it's pretty good. It's
you guys
heavier
pretty much
overall than
nailed
I
it.
thought. And the other thing is, this is, aside from the heads, cheap to put together. Stock rebuilt bottom end, nothing motor.
Or you can have that motor in your old pickup or something.
Yeah.
That's what you get from Chevy.
You can put together this combination.
Yeah.
425 basically. Question is, will the Ford beat it?
We're about to see, I think.
I think the Ford.
I think the
outruns it.
Ford's going to take this one away.
Let's go hang it on there.
Yeah.
I bleed Ford blue, Dolchek.
I know, me too, Ford Burger.
Ford Burger.
And now we're ready to run the Ford and Chevy, guys. I'm gonna give you a little bit of ammunition in order to fight this out on the internet. The 351 Windsor has a tiny bit more compression than the small block Chevy and 2 more cubic inches. Why is that? Well, because the 351 came from the factory with a 3.5-inch stroke and the 350 Chevy has a 3.48-inch stroke. That 20,000ths of an inch? I don't think it's really getting you that much, but hey, that's up to you to decide. I've talked a lot about how we made these engines identical, but let's look at some other things that make these two engines different so that you can sort of guess in advance, is the 351 Windsor gonna make more or less power than the Chevy? Now, first of all, the deck height on these two engines is different. The small block Chevy has a factory blueprint spec of 9.028 inches, whereas this one is 9.5 inches. What is deck height? It is the distance between the center line of the crankshaft and the top of the block here, where the cylinder head bolts on. Now, why would that matter for performance? First of all, it's heavier because it's got a taller deck height, but it also means that the intake manifold is potentially wider and the runner lengths may be a little bit different, and runner length can affect performance. A longer runner tends to make more low-end torque, a shorter one tends to make more high-end power, and in a dual plane like this, there is a mix of long and short. So there could be a clue in there somewhere. But there's another difference. With that taller deck height also comes a longer connecting rod. The Windsor has a 5.955-inch connecting rod all throughout. The small block Chevy is 5.7 inches, and the Windsor also has more piston compression height, so the rod is longer, the piston is heavier. The 350 Chevy came out in 1967, the 351 Windsor came out in 1969. They're very much a product of the same era, and because they've been around about that same period of time, the development and the expectation of horsepower in the aftermarket has been extensive. Other things that might affect the difference between these two engines, the Ford is a symmetrical port design, whereas the Chevy has 2 ports right together on the outboard corners. The Chevy has the middle exhaust ports right together instead of split. That could make a little bit of a difference. Does all of that add up to the Ford making either more or less power than the Chevy? That's what we're here to find out, and that's gonna happen now.
So Freiberger, you know why I think the Ford might be better than the Chevy?
You painted it blue.
How did you know? It's just so much more regal and dignified with this blue paint. Okay, here's why I think it might make more power. Because of the symmetrical port layout on the Windsor, I think the average port length on the manifold runners is a little shorter. It's gonna tune at a higher RPM. It's gonna make peak power at 6,000 rather than 5,900 or 61. And I think this is actually a better head design.
I think the head could be better. I mean, the advertised numbers are virtually the same for the Chevy and Ford AFR 195 head.
All right, I think that's it, man.
We're close. Go get some water in it and see what it does.
Now we see Ford domination.
Only in your mind.
Yep.
Okay, we're Fordified.
Blue.
Yeah, I know.
Fortified.
Dulcich and I are Ford guys now. I don't know if
yeah.
you know that. Yeah.
Gone to the dark side.
How do you know it's the dark side?
Well, I don't know.
Well, he does know, actually.
I know,
Yeah,
he's
I do
the
know.
only one that knows.
So Steve just spent all this time tuning up this engine, so he knows the answer. We don't. The only thing that we noted is we had to pull some jets out of it because it was running rich with the same jets that the Chevy had.
Particularly at lower engine speeds.
Because?
My belief is because the plenum in this intake manifold, the divider isn't relieved like it is on the Chevrolet. So it's not sharing any cylinders, and it gives the carburetor a much stronger signal at low engine speed. And so had to do a little finagling front and rear and got it pretty squared away.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to hurt us on horsepower, though, that divided plenum.
Well, we know that cutting a divider in it makes power. You and I have done it a couple times.
Does it make power? Does it make it more drivable? You know, because it makes power because they won't run sometimes because they're so ugly down there at 2,500 or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I know and you guys don't.
Fire it up and let's find out.
Mundo, right?
No, it's better by 6
by
numbers.
A wee bit.
Yeah.
By 2/10 of a point in compression and 3 cubic inches.
Yeah.
Wow. So what we just saw with the numbers going by on the screen was basically really close to the Chevy, but we got to look at the graph. So in the end, the Ford made 427.1 pound-feet of torque at 4,200 RPM, and up top 430.6 horsepower at 6,100. But that does not tell the whole story. Really overlaying the two engines and looking at them together, and then doing the math to average the power throughout the curve, I mean, we're talking they are within 2.2 pound-feet of torque from 3,200 to 6,200, and they're within 1.5 horsepower. So you can see that the Ford actually looks a little bit stronger in here, and it made just a few more numbers up high, but in the end, you're never gonna feel that in the car. They're the same.
We're talking twosies, threesies.
They're both good.
Yeah. It should be a surprise to no one, in fact. It's an interesting study because what it tells you is that there is no inherent design flaw or benefit in either engine in straight power production. You might see it in longevity and things like that. You know, the Chevy center exhaust ports being right together in an endurance application can be a lot of heat buildup. I mean, there's little things like that.
This, I don't know what the rod length in this is, but it's got more deck height, so I'm assuming it's got more compression distance and more connecting rod in it.
Yeah, this has only 20 thousandths more stroke. It's 3.5 versus 3.48.
Yeah, this reminds me of kind of going back to bore versus stroke stuff. You know, and when we've done that test. In this kind of world that we live in the street car, these type of engines,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter that much. I mean, this thing's got a bunch more deck height, but it doesn't change anything. I mean, in extreme cases like Pro Stock or something, I guess it does. But in this situation, the street stuff, it just doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, to me the takeaway is guys will spend so much time micro-focusing on things like, oh, the long rod or the big bore short stroke combo or some magic bullet, and really when it comes down to airflow, camshaft, cylinder head, manifold design, header.
But in this case, they're the same. They both have the same bore, and the stroke is different by 20 thousandths. That's nothing.
But the deck height's different, so you've got a long rod.
Yeah, so what?
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. So what?
Yeah, probably means this piston's heavier, but whatever. Same thing. If you wanted to give an edge, if you have to declare a winner, it's going to go to the Ford, though. Okay, Steve, I'm gonna go with the same. I mean, I'd like to say we were right in the Ford one, but the truth is that the old theory of an engine's an air pump comes back into play. You put in the same displacement, same compression, same cam, same airflow, they do the same thing.
I'm walking away a little perplexed.
Why?
Well, I really expected to see something out of that Ford, like maybe 10, 15 horsepower.
What? That's only because you've personally bonded with it because you painted it blue.
Oh, well, maybe there is something to that, Freiberger.
But seriously, let's look at it just from an opinion point of view. I mean, we've both built a lot of these engines. They make the same power. Which one do you personally like better?
It depends on the application. If I had a Jeep or some other vehicle and I wanted to do a simple swap, the small block Chevy wins hands down. I think it's smaller, more compact, lighter, lower deck. Probably be better.
Here's the last thing actually to consider is that I went through the Summit Racing catalog because I bought all of the parts for all of these, and I really thought that the Ford was going to be more expensive, but I did the math and they're very, very close.
So Ford versus Chevy, which is it for you?
It's the same thing! It just doesn't matter. And that's what we learned this time on Engine Masters, which is presented by AMSOIL, and we really appreciate the support from Summit Racing and Permatex and Autometer and Holly in the form of Earls and also Mr. Gasket.
Nice.
Senor Gasket.
All right.
All right, see you next time on Engine Masters.
I had a rave while you were getting your battery fixed, Chris. A rant.
A rant?
Yeah.
What did you claim?
That was my big moment, you know? I was taking fuel lines off and then freaking camera.
Wasn't there?